How's everyone doing today? Today on the channel, we're building a set of rock sliders, and well, they're not going to be for a Jeep. We're helping out a friend of the channel. He overlands every weekend, gets out quite a bit, gets out a lot more than I do. So he's afraid of damaging his vehicle, and he said, you know, I wish you could build me a set of rock sliders. So we're going to actually do that. We're going to go through the process of templating his frame, know exactly where we can bolt up, and go through full fabrication of a set of rock sliders. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in a Jeep or a Toyota, a Defender, a Dodge. The build process is the same. So if you don't want to build them for a Toyota, we love Toyotas too, a Jeep or whatever, it's exactly the same. Your dimensions just change a little bit, but the build principle is the same. And that's really what I'm hoping to show here, some of the build principles and different ways of building things. It's not just, you know, watch me build a set of rock sliders. There's some good building tips as we go through it. So this would be a multi-part build. I can't squeeze it all in one build. So in this first video, we're going to get the one side all fabbed up and ready to weld. Now we're doing this at a time when there's a material shortages, so luckily we're still finding some tube. So with that, as we go through, if you have any comments, questions, or anything on how to build it, or things you'd like to see as you go, I'd very much appreciate some comments. And if you would, as you're watching this, if you like the content, subscribe. Alright, on to the build. So we measured up his forerunner, and we tried to come up with a couple ideas. One thing I didn't like about most of the things I've seen, where the back kickout bar is, there's probably a foot or two before the back wheel. So if you're sliding down anything, you're going to hit body then tire. The other one was I seen some of these with a straight bar that comes out and it's kind of squared off. Don't really care for that, because if you're sliding down and something slides in, well, now you can't go forward or backwards, you're stuck. So we're going to bring this pretty far back. We're going to keep it rounded so that if something does slide in, well, it can walk its way out. Alright, so we have some 1/8 wall ERW tubing, and at the time we're recording this, there's big material shortages. There's not a whole lot of this tubing left, at least in the St. Louis area. So just for fit up, I have some of this 80 thou wall tubing. We're going to make a couple of these pieces just for fit up. Alright, so we know from the standards we've built, so we got a cutout here that's right on the tendency of the bend, and it's marked in inches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We know that it takes about 7.5 inches for a bend. And I'll leave a link for this standard, and we got one at 45. So we have to make a 90 and a 30. Alright, so we have our 4-inch minimal here, be the 7.5 inches for the 90, and then we'll bend this down at a 30. So I've got the arrows pointing to the bend areas. Alright, so we know that it's 4 inches out to the end. So first thing is we're just going to get it located. So I'm just going to put our digital level on it. Rotate it so that we're level there again. We need those two bends to be in the same plane. Now this bend's only going to be to 30 degrees, so get the slack out. Alright, so I've made a couple videos on this already. So I made a couple paper templates, one for the 30-degree cope and one for the 90. So I'm going to go in here and make a line halfway up so that I can clock my templates. we have to be in just a little bit. All right, so here's that bar. So we're around that little body mount there. So it looks like we're going to be just behind. It almost looks like we're just behind this lip.
Right.
Want to kick it up at all, or?
You know what? The bottoms of my doors are. This is actually the bottom of my door, so,
yeah, so
I don't think we better kick it up too much, because I think that's why they're leaving them farther forward, so this moves over the top. But if we can refrain from that.
No, we can leave it straight. I'm just making sure before we.
And straight's easier for you too.
Oh yeah.
A whole lot easier, wouldn't it be?
So there's, except we're gonna be actually back.
Right behind that.
Yeah, we're gonna be right there. So that way, as you slide off,
right,
you don't get in. Because all the ones I've seen, it stops like here.
Right.
It's like,
well, if I slide off, it's something that's gonna wedge.
What happens here?
Right. is your own problem. Yeah.
So if we make that kind of right there, which will be right at the end of the door, that puts us at 67. Nice. All right, so we made a quick little template of the underside of the frame. So all of these will be the bolt up points. This spot's back here for the emergency brake cables. And don't know what this used to be, but there's a couple tapped holes in there. We're going to clearance those so we can bolt in. We'll bend. That'll help stiffen this location a little bit too. And we'll put a lip on the bottom of this so it'll wrap under a little bit, so if it gets hit, it's not going up. Obviously it's not going to go up with this. That'll definitely help in the back section. Alright, so now we need to check it on the other side. Now we laid the template over the passenger side as well, and well, they did a good job of copying each side. So pretty much both sides are going to be the same. We went and picked up the steel for the side supports. We've got some material there for some gussets we're going to do. We need a couple more pieces of tube, and we got to copy our prototype. So the prototype worked out pretty good. Now the long piece we have bent here, that's going to be actual. It'll be interesting as we cut the base piece out that goes against the frame. We'll get to do some plasma cutting. All right, to copy this prototype, we're going to get this leg of it bent. This is our main rod. So we need to go through. We got to add, 4 inches for the. So that'd be 6 inches for the first leg, 6 inches for this leg, and then. Alright, so I want to make sure that all my bends are clocked the same. So I'm just going to take this little vise I've got. I need to make a clamp. I'm going to set this so that it's 0. And that way, as I keep bending, as long as I keep going at 0, I know all the bends will be relative to each other. So I'll get the length right first, then we'll get it in rotation. Okay, so that's 0. We'll get this locked back down. Now this is a 30-degree bend. So we're going to cut this off. Make sure I get plenty of material. We'll cut this. That'll allow us to get this notched. So the first notch is 6 inches off. So it's nice to use a setup block so that there's our first notch. And then what we can do is I'll put a straight edge across this way, and that'll tell me where the other notch is supposed to be. So the other notch is going to come in right there. Alright, so we're going to use our paper templates. I need to mark the center point, and that's just going to be 3/4 of an inch up. Now if you have something that you know is 3/4 of an inch, you can also just use that. Set it down and so from there we just got to mark it. Alright, so it's all marked. Now what we'll do is we'll take it over and we'll hand cut it. Alright, so this piece is all fit. Did just a little bit more sanding on it. We're fitting it with this 246 block. So what we're doing is we've got it in the back. And then we'll just slide it forward. This is just a piece of test tube. Test tube, that's funny. This is just a piece of tubing to let me know where I'm going to intersect at. So that tells me that right here is our intersection for our cope. Center of the tube. We just took the line we marked. This is the intersection, that's the center. We lined it up with that line. Alright, so we're doing just a little bit of fit up on this really steep angle. You can see in the back it's hitting real hard, not hitting real hard in the front. You know, with the back there. So where I would love to have a notcher that I could cut at that angle. I think we're going to have to build one. Alright, something that these setup blocks are really good for too, if I'm trying to measure. Sometimes it's hard to eyeball exactly where the end point is. So if you set your block against them, you can very easily measure right up to the edges. So the long piece is going to be 3/4 of an inch shorter. So since that is 7.5, we'll make the other leg 6 3/4. Alright, so we're going to just use a basic framing square. It's like the bin's fairly square, so that's a plus. So 6 3/4 is the inside of the notch. So we'll cut it there, and the knots will take us back to that point. Okay, so there's the root. We're lined up on center. Okay, there's that notch. So I know I'm 2 inches off here. And where I'm touching there, it's 2 inches, so I'll just come back 2 inches. That's the back point, and then put the notch in. Alright, so I'm just going to use the little gauge I have from being a machinist. And you could always just measure the inside. I'll show you a couple ways to do this. So I need to know what the spacing is on the inside. This expands, and I can measure over this. So I'll show you 2 ways to do this. If you have, just so you know, it's called a planer gauge. If you don't have a planer gauge, there's an easier way. Alright, so this is kind of a old carpentry trick. So you don't have a planer gauge, you have paint sticks. So basically you can just expand those to the inside, get them where you want them, just draw a line. And as long as you're on the sides and on this edge, I can just measure over, and that tells me what the spacing is on the inside. That way I'm not guessing what it is here. I know exactly what it is by this. So it's like most things. If you have the nicer tools, use them. You want a practical tool? Well, those are a dime a dozen as well. Alright, so let's get these tubes cut. And I think we're going to put maybe 3 of these in here and 1 up at the other end. How we'll line up this notch, take the level and put it on the spindle. And then what we'll do is get a piece of tubing cut. We'll set this in there. First, we'll get it to our length. Then we'll rotate this to 0. So what it is, the Harbor Freight notcher is okay. But times I find it very troublesome. hopefully this one fits like it's supposed to. A little bit long. We're holding up here, so I'm going to have to take a little bit off that one. It's like about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so we just skimmed a little bit off of it. Looks like it's there. I got to square it up a little bit because it's just a little out of square. So the trick is when you're hole sawing like that, where you're skimming, even when you're normal cutting, let it do the work. Don't force it through. Alright everyone, so that was getting together the RockSliders. So we worked out the design, we measured the vehicle, and that's a Gen 4 4Runner. And got the template made. In the next video we'll have the RockSliders all tacked, and we'll have to do a secondary fit. I want to fit it when it's all tacked, just to make sure before I weld them up. And that'll be the going template for the other side as well. So if you have any questions about tube bending or welding, I'll see in one of these videos I'll leave here. Right, and remember this, well, it's Jeepingmo. We do some stuff with the other vehicles as well. So I hope you like the little Toyota stuff here in there. But remember, it's not as much about the Toyota as it is just a way to build things. These could very easily have been for a Jeep, a Ram, Range Rover, whatever. So it's more about the building and the build process. And ultimately, you know, it's we call it a Jeep community, and Toyotas are part of that. They get out there right with us. It's almost always been a Toyota when I'm out. So alright, so if nothing else, I'll see you in the next video. So until then, this is Jeepingmo. See you in the rest of the build.